Hi, welcome today. My name is Amelia Ott, and I work at Family Resource Navigators as a program manager with our supported decision-making program. Family Resource Navigators is a grantee for the SDM TAP program from the State Council of Developmental Disabilities, and in partnership with Support for Families, we collaborated in creating this curriculum. And today we are going to learn about using supported decision making in healthcare settings. So some of our learning goals today are going to be reviewing concerns about supported decision making's use in healthcare settings. We're going to learn about some of the tools and companion documents that you may encounter in healthcare settings. And then we're going to talk about some planning that you can use while using supported decision making as you kind of navigate through those healthcare settings. So again, you may have watched some of the recordings of these modules, or you may have looked through a lot of the PDFs that we've created. But if you haven't, and this is your first introduction, you will know that a lot of us receive support at different points in our lives, and that looks very different for different people. For myself, I kind of do it a little bit more subconsciously. I may watch the news or I may read articles, and that information kind of is stored in my subconscious and influences the decisions I make on a day-to-day basis. However, for many other people, they have to make conscious choices. And many times for the people in our lives who have disabilities, they do need to make more conscious decisions, and they do need to talk about those people with supporters in their lives. And so with this, some make decisions themselves with or without support, and some ask others to make those decisions for them. And some are interdependent decision makers, making decisions together with friends or family members. And so, again, it's okay to have somebody else make a decision for you. There's many times that I wish that I could just say, you know what, I'd rather somebody else make this decision. Unfortunately, most of the time, those decisions are the decisions that I do have to make for myself, though. So what is supported decision making for people with disabilities? So a law called AB 1663 enables people with disabilities to choose to use or formalize decision making supports for themselves in supported decision making, or you'll see it referred to as SDM in this recording. In SDM, the person with the disability, which we'll see referred to as PWD, maintains their decision-making power, chooses supporters to help with decision-making, and makes the final decision, or they can also substitute somebody to make the final decision for them. The person with the disability can choose to use supported decision-making in all settings, some settings, and this can include healthcare settings. So a person with a disability can use supported decision-making in healthcare settings, and some of the ways are they can have the person attend doctor's appointments. So if somebody needs to go to the doctor, that supporter can go to the doctor's appointment with them. They can have them help them check in at the doctor's appointment. They can have them go into the room. They can have that supporter talk to the doctor. Those are all kind of crucial points that a person with a disability may be impacted, right? Maybe that person with a disability isn't comfortable talking with somebody who's unknown. And that's a great way for a supporter to bridge those gaps. Another way is that they can have somebody help them focus, right? So a supporter can help the medical team understand that you, as the person with the disability, are the decision maker, and the focus should be on the person with the disability. So how many times do you walk into a doctor's appointment and the doctor focuses on the person with the disability? What you'll find many times is that's not the case if there is a supporter in the room. The doctor looks at the supporter, right? And so the supporter needs to continue to redirect it to the person with the disability, unless the person with the disability wants the focus to go to somebody else. So another way is that the supporter can help the person with the disability remember the symptoms and what the person with the disability wants to talk about with the medical team. So sometimes that's talking about the symptoms in advance. The supporter can write down those symptoms. They can have it in paper. Maybe it's recording it on audio so that the person with the disability can just press play, right? And it's in the person with the disability's own voice, right? And there's no need to kind of concern, there's no back and forth, there's no middleman. It's just the person with a disability and the doctor really talking, but not necessarily talking in the traditional sense, but a recording, an audio recording that's there. But that advance help from a supporter can be really crucial. Another way that the supporter can help is to help you communicate again, right? So if doing an audio recording is not something that works, again, if you talk about those symptoms in advance, then the supporter can help communicate those symptoms in advance or at the appointment to the medical team. Additionally, the supporter can also make those appointments with the doctors, right? They can call, they can reschedule, they can call the pharmacy, they can fill those prescriptions. And those are kind of really crucial and really helpful points. How many times do you end up on the phone filling in pharmacy requests? I know that, it takes time. I don't want to be on the phone with the pharmacy trying to find out, when a prescription is going to be ready. So getting support in those areas is really crucial. And having access even in the, medical provider app, right? It can be really helpful to be able to have somebody send an email on your behalf or be able to order the prescriptions so that they're ready and easily available. And so then a supporter can also help you understand, right? How many times does a doctor talk to you in medical terms, right? And they struggle to turn those medical terms into plain language. That's a really big concern for most people, right? For a person with a disability, understanding those concerns, I struggle, right? You, as a person with a disability, it might be even more of a struggle. So, having a supporter who's able to sit there and really kind of talk with you, have the doctor slow down, confirm with you that you're understanding it, making sure that everybody's on the same page, it is really important. It's really crucial. And then the supporter can assist you, right? They can help you make those medical decisions, right? What medicine you decide to move forward with taking, if there's a surgery that you need to move forward with, if you're going to get a shot, if there's a blood draw that you need to take, what time you're going to go to a medical appointment. So those are all different ways that a supporter could help you. And there's a lot of other ways that a supporter can help you in healthcare settings. So now we're going to talk about some concerns that can come up in healthcare settings. So some of the concerns about using supported decision-making in healthcare settings are that a person with a disability may need more time for the visit in order to be able to use supported decision-making, and that may not be available in a short visit. So as we know, appointments are made for doctor's visits for a certain amount of time. Those visits are generally not long enough, even for they're just not long enough in the first place. And that can be very difficult, especially when you have a complex medical visit and discussion to have. When you bring in another supporter, and you're having to go over more complex situations, doctors may start to rush through those appointments. And so really having to slow down and talk to those doctors and say, we will not be kind of leaving until we have all of this information fully discussed is really crucial. And talking to the doctor in advance about that um, at the beginning of the appointment so that there is a clear expectation that a supporter is there to help work through the visit to ensure that the person with the disability is supported and that the person with the disability is making that final decision. And that if the person with the disability does not have all of the information to understand, then they're not able to make a clear decision. Another concern is that the decisions that need to be made can be high risk and may have short timelines. Again, we all end up in emergency situations, right? We don't want to end up in emergency situations, but they happen. And typically, those emergency situations are high risk and they need to be made immediately. Many times, a supporter may not be able to be available immediately. Thinking about having multiple supporters available or a backup supporter who can be contacted or multiple ways to contact a supporter, whether via phone, via text, so that somebody can be contacted in the event of an emergency so that decisions can be made in the quickest and shortest timeline available. Another is that medical practitioners may require documentation of the supporters' roles. So in California, supported decision making is recognized in law. However, what you will find is that many medical providers, such as Kaiser or Sutter Health, their organizations operate through multiple states. And so they have additional documents that need to be signed to allow them to discuss with supporters information, right? And so an authorized representative may need to have a signed paper on file, even though a supported decision-making agreement is on file for California, because Kaiser, as a national organization, needs that to be in compliance as a company. So making sure that as well as the supported decision-making agreement, you also have Kaiser or the medical practitioner's documentation. And then a person with a disability have reported that they can feel marginalized in healthcare settings when they bring in supporters, as the focus of the medical practitioner can shift to the supporter rather than the patient. And we did mention that before. Another concern is that there may be situations where people may not be able to easily communicate their needs, priorities, and preferences, such as being unconscious or overcome with anxiety, panic, and worry, that supported decision making cannot work in such circumstances. I don't mind mentioning this. My son, when he is in new or uncertain situations, or even in situations that he's just not comfortable, although he is verbal, he just will choose not to engage. And so in those situations, it's very hard for him to express what he wants. And so he'll default to what I want. And that's really, really challenging because I do know that he has an opinion, and I want him to be able to express those opinions. And he does. He does have opinions, but he's just so overcome that he would rather have somebody else make those decisions. And so being able to sometimes have those conversations in advance and have maybe preference sheets already there, or maybe pictures on a piece of paper so that they can point to them is maybe a way to overcome those. So, right, using supported decision making in healthcare settings can be easier, and some of the concerns eased if the decision maker and their supporters plan ahead. Specific documents or tools can assist, as well as planning with supporters on how and when to use supported decision making. In addition, the decision maker may want to specify situations where they ask someone else to make decisions for them, such as in an emergency medical situations. We are now going to talk about some of the tool and companion documents. Many of these are the documents that I mentioned that a healthcare provider or an organization that operates outside of California may ask you to fill out. So a common documents that you will hear about are permission to exchange information forms or release of information forms. And so having access to information about healthcare decisions may be essential for a supporter to assist a person with making a decision. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is HIPAA, is a federal law that prevents your healthcare providers from sharing information about someone without consent. The individual with the disability using SDM may need to sign a release of information if he or she wants a supporter to access protected health information. Some healthcare providers' systems can require a particular form to be executed. It may also be possible to use a standard HIPAA compliant release. So with a supported decision maker, there are also standard HIPAA forms that you can include with the supported decision making agreement. In many cases, a healthcare provider and or system will allow that to be included in the file, although many times the provider or system will ask for their specific form to be filled out in acknowledgement that it is specific to their organization. Although there are specific HIPAA forms for certain states and or like nationally recognized ones. Another one of these is going to be an authorized representative or personal representative. These are someone that you can choose to act on your behalf. The person will have access to all of your personal health information. You may also allow them to make healthcare decisions for you. These sometimes are really wonderful. However, some of them can allow somebody to make decisions on your behalf, which can be concerning for some people. And so you have to think about some of these forms because you may only want somebody to have access to your information, but not make medical decisions on your behalf. And so it's important to read the forms before you fill them out to ensure that you are signing forms for the correct supporters and only giving access to those supporters that you wish to have. And then so managed care plans often have forms that can be completed for authorized representatives, often just with a signature or signature stamp. Some organizations may require a witnesses or a notarization. So a durable power of attorney for healthcare is a legal document that allows you to assign someone else to make decisions about your healthcare if you become unable to do so yourself. It provides that person, called your agent, with instructions regarding the types of medical treatment you prefer. This document should be honored across medical settings. So this is a document that many people have on file. It's nationally recognized, and whether you have a disability or if you do not have a disability, many people use this form so that in case of an emergency, their wishes are used if there is an emergency. And many times people sit down together and they talk about in an emergency situation or if something happens, these are the things that I want to take place. So with a supported decision-making agreement, they can be signed by the decision maker, but it's not necessary for use with SDM. One thing to keep in mind though is that because you don't have to have it signed, it's a lot more difficult when you're in a healthcare setting, because in healthcare settings, with HIPAA, you really are up against some federal laws that medical providers have to ensure that they are not allowing free access to your protected medical information. So, a supported decision making agreement specifies the roles of the supporters and their access to your information. It can also be signed by supporters confirming that they understand their roles and responsibilities. It can include backup plans if the supporters are unavailable or if the decision maker is unable to communicate their needs or choices. So, planning for use of supported decision making. Whether or not a person chooses to use companion agreements or a supported decision making agreement, planning for the use of supported decision making in healthcare settings can improve the decision making process for people with disabilities. So, some initial questions to consider when planning are: who are the person with the disability's long-term medical team members? So, well, who are their primary care providers? Do they have nurse practitioners? Do they have therapists? Which supporters will be assisting them in what situations? And what informations do they need to have to be effective, right? We know that some supporters, some family members may know more about the therapist that they see, and maybe some other people know better about their physical disabilities and are better able to help in those areas. And then how much support does the person with the disability want in making those healthcare decisions? There may be areas that the person with the disability doesn't want any help in, but there may be another area that they do want help. There may be a physical disability where they do want somebody. They do need somebody to go with them to their primary care provider to assist with transfers in and out of their wheelchair and onto the bed. But then there's no other areas in the healthcare setting that they need any help with, right? And that's okay. They get to choose, as the person with the disability, you get to choose where you want support and how much support. And is there any information or handouts that the person with the disability wants to share with the medical team about supported decision making or the importance of focusing on the patient and not the supporters? Is there a fact sheet that the person with the disability or the supporters want to provide to the providers, right? Is there a one pager that you write up that you give to the doctors with the supported decision making agreement, with all of the supporters' information, talking about everything that's going on? Maybe that's what you want to do. Sorry. Maybe that's not. That's up to you guys to discuss. You guys will figure out what works best. There may be places or a provider that you continue to kind of get pushback. And maybe there's just that one provider that you guys decide that's where the provider that you're going to make one for. And then, do supporters need copies of the patient's insurance or ID card or any other relevant information, right? So there may be a supporter who is in charge of going to the pharmacy and picking up medication, and that is their only job as a supporter. So does that supporter need a copy of the insurance card? Does the supporter need a copy of the ID card? Is any of the medication, controlled substance where an ID card is needed? Does that supporter need a copy of the, health savings plan or FAFSA card or a credit card to ensure that the medicine is being paid for by the person with the disability, right? Those are things to think about to make sure that the supporter has what they need to support the person with the disability. So planning for an individual medical visit. So beforehand, this is something that you can think about. So discuss the purpose of the appointment. Is it a routine checkup, or is there a specific issue that needs to be discussed? What does the decision maker want out of the appointment? Is it important that expectations are clear, particularly given that a healthcare provider might have limited time? So, if any of those things are needing to be discussed, where's that information held? Is it written down? Is it just in somebody's head? Right? Where's that information being kept? Is it the person with the disabilities responsibility, or is it the supporter's responsibility to keep track of that information? Is it the person with the disabilities responsibility to lead with that information and ensure that the appointment is moving forward with those? Or is it the supporter's responsibility to make sure that the appointment is moving forward with those? Those are things to think about in advance. 2, determine who will attend the appointment and what everyone is responsible for during the appointment. So again, talking about who is going to be there and who's responsible. So 3, determine what role the individual and the supporter will play at the appointment. So I kind of discussed this in advance. So questions to consider. If a supporter is attending the meeting, will that supporter communicate with other supporters after the meeting? So who will be relaying the discussion that happened? What information needs to be provided to any other supporters? Was there a resolution? Were surgery options discussed? Were medication options discussed? Can that supporter contact the healthcare provider after the meeting with follow-up questions, and are releases in place to allow this communication? Who will speak to the healthcare provider? Who will ask questions of the provider, right? Many times in those appointments, there's so much information that's going in one ear, out the other. And we walk out of there and we're like, oh my gosh, now I have 5 other questions that I totally forgot to ask. Do I email them? Do I call them? How do I get in contact with them? Is it the supporter? How does the supporter contact them? Or does the supporter have to contact the person with the disability, but the person with the disability doesn't want to contact them? Talking about that in advance is always a good idea so that there isn't any miscommunication. There isn't any conflict in knowing how to handle those situations. And then who will record what occurs in the appointment? Who will record what items need follow-up and what questions are unresolved? If the individual needs accommodations, more time to respond to a question, information presented in a particular format, who will communicate that need in the appointment? Many times you'll walk into an appointment and there's a lot of information, but that information can't be translated into an understandable way. Many times the information may need to be turned into pictures so that the person with the disability is able to fully understand, right? They can hear it, but they also need to see it pictures to be able to have a visual representation. That can't be necessarily done in a doctor's office. And so the information needs to be brought home, needs to be visualized on a computer or on a piece of paper. And then once they visualize it, then that person with a disability needs to be able to come back and be able to ask more questions, right? Is that going to be an email communication, or is that going to be another in-person meeting? You just don't know exactly until you talk that through. And then understand that you may need to provide information and education about supported decision making. So many medical personnel may be unfamiliar with the concept of SDM. The process will be individualized, and the following questions can guide the discussion. When will you explain supported decision making to the provider before the appointment? Is it possible to have a phone call or mail or email written materials? Who will explain the concept of supported decision making? How will you explain the role of supporters? How will you communicate the values of supported decision making? If you choose to provide written materials, what will you provide? And then make sure you have all the needed documents. Examples are permission to exchange information forms, information on supported decision-making, and or your written supported decision-making agreement signed by any parties that are involved. So, planning for emergencies. We don't want emergencies to happen. They're the worst case scenarios, but planning for emergencies is really important. So, in an emergency, what information should a supporter have? What is their role then? How would they be contacted? In an emergency, typically that means that a person is unable to communicate their needs, their wants to medical professionals in some way. Having a discussion in advance so that a plan is in place for the supporters to know what your wishes are is really important so that you don't have any conflicts or any concerns, right? It is very common that different people feel different ways on how they handle medical situations. Talking about those things in advance is really important. So, is there an emergency plan? Do they know what hospital to go to and when? If a person with a disability has a physical disability and they have specialists who see them and have been seeing them for years, that person may really want to go to a specific hospital where their attending physician is on duty and will be called in. That is very important for that person's care and emergency plan to state. Do they understand what the preferences the person has for their healthcare? Should one or more supporters be an authorized representative or hold durable medical power of attorney? How will copies of any documentation be available in an emergency? So another option is AB 2338, which is the next of kin law. So under 2338, a healthcare provider or designee of the healthcare facility caring for the patient may choose a surrogate to make healthcare decisions on the patient's behalf as appropriate in the given situation. The exact language of PC 4712 is as follows. The patient surrogate shall be an adult who has demonstrated special care and concern for the patient, is familiar with the patient's personal values and beliefs to the extent known, and is reasonably available and willing to serve. The idea behind the next of kin law, proponents say, is to empower representatives to advocate for patients rather than allow a hospital to make medical decisions, which can be influenced by cost, bed space, or insurance pressures. So previously, hospitals, doctors made the decisions about what to do with people's medical care in emergencies. And of course, doctors and hospitals made those decisions and they used the costs, bed space, and insurance pressures, right? If insurance didn't want to pay for a surgery, then that was something that they took into account. And if insurance didn't want to pay and the hospital didn't want to cover the cost, then they just didn't do it. And the person didn't get the care. Or say the hospital is really full and they just decided, oh, well, we're just going to kind of discharge this person, even though we know that we could, give them more care. That happened. So next of kin law. So Possible people are on the list are spouses or domestic partners, siblings, adult children and grandchildren, parents, and an adult relative or close friend. Under this law, the patient can let their healthcare team know who they would want to make decisions for them. The assignment of decision making can last no more than 60 days. And so, in these situations, many times when somebody is going into the hospital and they know that there is a medical situation that could cause them to have surgery or is high risk, they can go ahead and assign a next of kin. So that if anything happened to them, or if they were going into surgery and they were high risk of something happening, then the hospital could use the person that was assigned next of kin to make a decision. Typically, right, a spouse who's legally married is the person who can make a medical decision. However, in these situations, you would not need to have a durable power of attorney. You could just assign somebody next of kin, and this would be no more than 60 days. So, whether a person decides to use independent, supported, or shared decision making is their decision. A person with a disability chooses who they want to support them and the type of support they want. They may find that certain documents, like a permission to exchange information or a supported decision making agreement, may make their process clearer to medical professionals. Making a plan for medical visits as well as for emergency situations can help the decision maker meet their needs and priorities. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you have any questions, you can go to our website at yourdecisionmatters.org. This work was made possible by the State Council of Developmental Disabilities. You can also find more information at familyresourcenavigators.org. And of course, we are so thankful for you watching this video. And of course, there are more recordings if you would like to learn more about this on our YouTube channel. And it is Family Resource Navigators if you search it online. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.